who went on to. Oh, here we
We're
go.
live.
We're live. Good.
Here we go. We're
Maybe
live.
we'll come back to that.
Oh my God. You go, oh, this is going to be an epic one. Okay. We're a bit late, everyone. I was just gearing myself up for the confront of this conversation. Just before we get into this epic topic tonight, where I'm sure we are going to really get into some wild debate about things that are happening in the world and explore what really fundamentally is going on and how crap we are at relating, and why that might be. Using me as the example, because, you know, I'm like, well, if I'm going to really make a statement that we're crap at relationships, that, like, as we put it here, right, crap at relationships, you know, let me get it. Crap at relationships. Hang on. Why isn't this coming up? Resisting anxiety. What's, oh, jeez. Someone. Like, as we put it here, right? Resisting anxiety, denying our own narcissistic defensiveness. Oh, we're going to go into what that even means. What is behind this inherent global incompetence in relating to each other as human beings? Not some robot, not some. Oh, I can hear me in the background there.
Okay. Yeah. I'm keeping an eye on the chat. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. This is going to be epic. So tell me, for those that are on, please join in this conversation. The whole intention here is that we explore all ends of the debate here. Hello, Padma and Jennifer. And when I say debate, hello, Alex, Talita, Steph, everyone who's joining in. When I say debate, it's not really a debate. It's like, we're really going to tease all of this out. Hey, Hayley, we're going to look at all of it, and we want to relate to all those things that are going on in the world right now and assert that we are crap at relating with each other. I'm asserting that, and we're going to use me as an example of how crap I am at relating. Okay, don't worry, everyone. I know it's a context. It's not a belief that I can't bust open tonight. I'm very okay. But before I do, please introduce this incredible human, Tom Ports-Mayer. How did you end up on this show with me? Who are you? And what are we doing tonight?
Thanks, Jessica. You know, this is what, our fifth or sixth kind of conversation like this.
Yeah.
And basically every time we do it, I feel really, really excited to do it more. For me, this is not about you and I talking about what we believe. This is about you and I exploring our beliefs so that we can evolve our understanding around topics. And if that's of benefit or interest to others, then that's awesome. I'm here to learn in reflection and in challenge, and I'm here, and I know you are too, recognizing that we are by definition limited, we are by definition prejudiced, we are by definition marred by our own defensive psychological structure, which has been built over time to make us feel safe, but has inevitable limitation built into it, has to have. And taking a position and territories and identity, and all of which serve enabling us to, you know, do what we need to do. But all of those can at times make us blind, make us ignorant, and make it really, really hard to relate to others and be intimate with others. And so here we are. I've been on this journey for 20 years, just fascinated with what it is to be human and how we get in the way of it, you know, how we get in the way of ourselves. When I was 27, I had a singular event experience where I was flooded with bliss. And in that moment, I realized how mad I had been and how I was bent out of shape by fear. And since then, I've been working out how do we get that stuff out of the way. And I know you've done loads of work on ethical and communication and integrity and accountability and general leadership awesomeness. And yet you really struggle in intimate relationships, as I do, as most people do. And it's like, now that's kind of what they're for. They're there to really take us to that place where we realize we're still being held back by fear, because it's easy to be single and avoid that, actually. But when it's time to really fall in love and get deep, deep, deep intimate, yeah, you know, that takes us to our madness, you know, and it's meant to.
Oh, I know. And I jumped on this live tonight and said to Tom, as we always do, about, you know, what's present. And I was like, I am so crap at relationships. And then we were like, oh, are we going to discuss the Black Lives Matter? And I'm like, two white people discussing Black Lives Matter right now just seems such a contradiction right now. So I didn't want to do that. But then we were talking about, you know, being heard and being seen and having a voice and standing up and you know, being able to say things. And then you hear about, you know, people are doing that, and everyone who's really rising up against something and wanting to stand up for something, then you've got all these people having opinions on that. And so there's this anxiety around people expressing themselves. It's like, oh, people are expressing themselves. This isn't right. Now I have to have an opinion on why they're expressing themselves. Now I'm going to get on Facebook and tell everyone about my opinion about everyone expressing themselves. And you might even have one about what I'm doing right now, expressing myself. So we've got this anxiety, and then there's whatever we experience about that. And then the third part in here that we put in there, this narcissistic defensiveness. Do you want to say a bit about that? Because you explain it really well.
Yeah, sure. Well, so I want to be really clear. There's a difference between narcissism, which we all experience, right, which is essentially our defensive egotism, and, you know, a narcissist, which is a specific psychological issue, right? It's a very specific psychological condition. It's actually quite rare. But narcissism is that part of us that likes to look good, likes to feel good, wants to be safe. You know, it's our ego structure. And unfortunately, when we relate to others, or we try to relate to other groups, or we try to have empathy, we're inevitably relating through the filter of our narcissism, through the filter of our ego identity. And it really gets in the way of understanding, gets in the way of us being able to self-reflectively be honest about our blind spots, because by definition they're blind. And it just makes relationship of all kinds, working ones, personal ones, private ones, family ones, really, really complicated, especially if you're trying to have relationships with people who are not, who don't even have that on their radar. They don't even know that their position is a position. You know, they're dealing in what they believe to be truths, you know, which is terrifying.
Well, that's actually you used a really good example of, you know, the Catholic Church and the sort of gay agenda. The gay agenda is to make everyone gay, if you didn't know. So just be careful. I might talk to you and make you gay. Be careful. So that's the gay agenda, according to the Catholic Church. And so I think you made the real point of, you know, when they are treating this particular group, or the, you know, LGBTIQ+ group bad, they're sort of defending the right to do that because, you know, this group of people are taking away their rights because they're trying to make them all gay.
Yeah, so this is,
you know,
this is symbolized by the term DARVO, right? So this is when perpetrators or offenders deny their behavior and end up attacking the individual that's confronting them from the position of them being a victim, right? And it's just a classic narcissistic kind of way of avoiding our responsibility. So, you know, that would be just, you know, it's like, so you'd be just like, oh my God, the gay lobby are shoving their agenda down our throats, and it's absolutely outrageous. And it's like, hold on a minute, you know, you've been persecuting homosexuals in your congregation. It's like, we're standing up for our rights, and yet your defense is you're putting yourselves in a victim position, which is not just a way of denying, but my God, it's a way of really pissing off the people who have a right to stand up and say, this isn't okay, you know, this isn't okay. And so, yeah, it's a really interesting thing to have on your radar, that people can quite easily turn it around and kind of deny your valid point by going to a place of victimhood, you know. And it's like, oh man, it's exhausting. Yeah, I mean, that's why compassion on both sides is so important, because we can keep the conversation open in ways where people can finally hear and understand. But I think I mean, I take a loving stand and believe passionately in a form of activism, which is about, you know, non-violence. It's about dignity. It's about love. And it's about strong communication. But people mistake that as that I'm kind of, you know, at times that I'm passive or not passionate, or that I don't get angry about injustice. And for me, it's like, no, I get angry. I get really angry. And the anger is an internal sensation which is motivating me to make the world a better place. But when I pick up tools and I open my mouth, I want to come from the most beautiful, most powerful, most clear, and most loving vibration. Because for me, it's the only thing that wakes people up, you know. And it doesn't mean that there won't be a passion in what I'm saying, because I'm burning with a frustrated anger about the injustice internally. But if it flips over to the point where I'm angry and shaming and blaming, and it's like, then actually that's when all the Darvo shit happens. You've given them a position through which they can then deny it, feel attacked, and then they just dig their heels in, you know. So it's like, I do get angry and I do take action. I'm currently doing a whole bunch of things that are systematically, individually, and on a societal basis making change. But it's like, but in those actions, I'm doing it from a deep faith in the human spirit. And it's about opening our hearts to everybody on every side of every aspect, because it's the only way that we can evolve and come up with new ways of making better choices.
Yeah. And this, you can't avoid. So just on what you said then, you know, you get angry, you might come out with something that's really just from anger, standing in anger. This is wrong. This should never have happened. These atrocities. I mean, particularly when you're talking about generations of suppression, right?
Yeah.
This can be in any kind of suppression. People bust out in times of anger. They finally get a voice. What comes back is usually, like you said, the defensiveness.
Yeah.
So you then have someone with suppression, then there's defensiveness, and it's sort of just like, this is sort of normal.
And it's fine, you know. This is not me saying don't be angry. Jesus Christ, be angry. You know, if that was my father who'd been, you know, choked to death by the police, you know, I'd be fucking livid. And that anger, there's a place for it. I'm not denying that. I'm saying it's all in the mix. It's all in the mix, and it's like, and it's all welcome. And you know, and we have to understand that the process of humans evolving, certainly my journey with it, it's like 20 steps forward, 19 steps backwards. I find myself going from not being aware of my patterns to then being completely aware of my patterns and doing them anyway, then hating myself for that. Then, you know, and it's just like, oh my, you know, it's like, it has not been quick progress. Yeah, stopping smoking and stopping biting my nails, that was pretty easy. But not being a twat in relationship, that's proving to be quite a tricky one, you know. It's like,
that's
it's hard.
Good. Maybe we should focus on you tonight then. we said to use me as the example of being crap in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I got on this call today and said, Tom, it's funny you say that. I've done all this work at recognizing my patterns. And I recognize that I've had a past of some pretty, what I would say, toxic relationships. And so I've done the work to really create great relationships. And then I find myself in a situation where I get triggered by something. And then I find myself acting out the pattern again. Oh my God, it's possibly happening again. I need to retreat. I'm all about honoring human beings and loving human beings. And, you know, a couple of nights ago, something happened. And I was in the middle of a super intimate moment with someone. And then I was like, okay, time's up. I've got to go. That absolutely upset that person, right? And I was like, I was just being honest. I needed to go. And when I talked to Tom about it, he said in that moment, you know, it was almost like he resisted intimacy. Except I couldn't see that. I'm like, no, I just needed to go because I have stuff on. And I'm on a schedule. Schedule's very good for me to stay in control. Right? But I didn't see that pattern. And then, like you said, I see it and then I beat myself up. Oh, because I didn't see it. And then I'm seeing this defensive narcissist. I got called on it. You are doing that. You know, you're just pushing. You're pushing away from me. La la la. And I'm like, no, I'm not. So then I got defensive. Help me out, bro. What do I do?
So here's the thing, right? It's like what's hard in these deals is the thing that makes these things bearable is when we're all totally taking 100% responsibility for our feelings, right? So it's like if if your partner was like, you know, you pull back and she's like, oh, that's it's really interesting. My sense is that you're withdrawing from intimacy. She's like totally 100% cool, right? She loves you, whether you're being intimate with her or not, whether you're going to stay or not. She's completely content in her own reality, and she's enjoying the bonus of you in that moment. And then you decide to take away the bonus of you, and she puts on her just absolutely loving curiosity hat. She's like, huh, okay, I totally hear you might have to go. I'm loving you as you are. And just for your sake, I'm really curious about this whole schedule thing. And maybe that's true. And I have to honor your, want to keep to the same bedtime or whatever it is, right? But maybe this was just getting really, really intense. And you want to stay, maybe you just got scared of intimacy. Maybe you're just trying to keep like a steady head on this because you don't want to lose perspective in its early days. And so I love you, and we can talk about it now, but you got to go. We'll talk about it tomorrow, right? If you had that level of open context, right, where you're not responsible how she's feeling, and she's not going to go into her own trigger around people run away from my intimacy or whatever her story is that made it painful, then we can all together like look at our madness in the container of our relationships and learn huge amounts. Because we're no longer saying, I need you to be a certain way so I can feel okay. I need you to stay and be intimate with me so I can be okay, right? What we're saying is like, I'm loving this and I'm loving you. And if you need to go, that's cool. But let's explore that, Then you wouldn't have the defensiveness. You're not responsible for her mood. You're not responsible for her pleasure, And within that, you feel totally loved and supported. And yet from there, you would totally question the choice, And then you'd be like, oh, cool, interesting. And that level of ownership makes it much like an amazing place. Our relationships become a petri dish upon which we look at, what's grown and what's not grown and what's evolving and what's limited, But it's only possible if we have that total grounded openness, which is almost impossible all the time. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the challenge, isn't it? Like you just said, the beauty is when you've got two people that are able to own their feelings, like able to be responsible for what they're feeling, right? And it's like, well, yeah, how do you get responsible for your feelings? Because if, Stu just said it then, that's an upper limit problem right there, sister. We're both reading that book, The Big Leap. So they talk about, it's a great book. It talks about the upper limit, and it is, but I was blind. I didn't see it as a pattern that was about to kind of take place. I was like, no, it's my schedule. It's happening.
Yeah.
It doesn't occur to me as that. And then later I kind of soften a bit and really look at it because I need to take some time to do that. And I can see what I'm doing is actually resisting intimacy. It's getting too close.
Yeah. It's a huge thing, ultimate receiving, people talk about becoming a giving person. What I've seen is actually just ultimately receiving, Hey, Nikki, nice to see you. It's it's a massive thing. I remember I was once on this course, and at the end of a kind of large day of processing, the women in the space, the men had done all of this release work, and it was about men who'd been wounded by the feminine, and all the female space holders, we were led into this space, and we were blindfolded, and the air was scented, and even though you were blindfolded, you could kind of tell the room was filled with candles, and then they kind of took our feet and lovingly washed them and anointed them and moisturized them and massaged them. And it was honestly such a beautiful experience. But at the time, I didn't know who'd done it for me. There were like 20 people it could have been. And I found it almost unbearable that I wouldn't know who it was, so that I couldn't give them this great compliment or this great thanks or return the favor. It was just like, just flipping receiving unconditionally without having earned it. Sometimes the most precious moments of intimacy really take us to our, are we valid to receive, and so people often run away from the deepest intimacy. So what we want to do with our partners is know that, not take it personally, and just keep holding out that reservoir of like open, curious loving. It's like, know that if our love is deep and pure, it will challenge it will take people to their, oh my God, if I receive this, then I was really let down before. It takes us to our validity, and we would rather believe that we don't deserve, because that makes sense of all those other times when we didn't get what we needed.
Yeah, it's so true. Just hearing you say you're getting this foot massage from someone that you can't even see, right? that brings up anxiety for me. Like I can just feel the anxiousness there of not knowing who it is, but also, yeah, not being able to sort of acknowledge or thank someone, like being kind of in this way, thank you so much for giving me attention without asking anything in return. It brings up this kind of sense of having to be apologetic for receiving.
Well, certainly having to justify, having to earn receipt. It's like,
Yes.
we talk about unconditional love, right? And unconditional giving. This is unconditional receiving, and it's a massively important spiritual practice, and it's like, it's I'm just reading some of the comments. It's a hugely important thing but also like the random act of kindness where you don't get the credit. So one of the things I used to do at my parties is we get people to write anonymous love letters. And it's an amazing thing to do. You write an anonymous love letter. You don't sign it. You don't put your number on it. And it's just an expression of love to a stranger that you'll never meet, and you're never going to see them read the letter, and you're not going to get the credit. And then you leave it somewhere for people to read, And that's a truly unconditionally loving act, right? And but then also what we do at those events is depending. I sometimes, before we send those letters out and leave them across London, we get people to randomly select one. And then they perceive that was being left for them now, right? And so then they read this letter, which has been written by a stranger for them, and often has people in floods of tears, because it's not earned. It's not earned.
Yeah. And it's such a big part of being seen. I just imagine what would have happened if, instead of resisting the anxiety that we feel over all of the riots over the weekend, right? Because I'm on social media. I happen to be surrounded by an amazing group of people that do a whole lot of work in coaching, consulting, training. So I get these amazing people writing amazing things, but that's not where it is everywhere. I'm just sort of in a bubble, I feel like sometimes.
Sure.
And then I went out and ventured around, and I was like, imagine if, when people really stood for something, regardless of their expression, they were met with exactly what you just said. Just some sort of note to go, I see you, I get it. I experienced guilt and shame watching it. I had a response to it, like, wow, this is full on. Like I've let this happen. Not individually, collectively, but still, I've let this happen.
Yeah.
There's, plenty of, I wanted to resist it. I was like, no, I wanted to run on the back of All Lives Matter and jump on that bandwagon, because that's definitely inclusive and that makes sense. But instead I sort of sat with it. And what I could see was no one is allowing this. Like, we're all reacting to that anxiety that we're feeling in our body. And I came back to, again, if we're always resisting this anxiety that we feel, what space do we have to even see what else is possible? What if we could be with anxiety in someone else's pain? What if we could just sit there and go, wow, I'm anxious around this conversation? And it's not even anxiety, it's uncertainty that we call anxiety, I think. How will we ever overcome getting you call it like a mastering or a practice in the kind of relationships if we don't get good at being with people's pain?
Yeah, this is, it's like we have to be able to have that space to let people have their experience. Compassion is not removing people's suffering. It's being able to stand in the face of it,
Yeah.
And in that, people feel really heard, they feel really seen, and it's like, it's not about it's not about reactionism. It's sometimes it's just enough just to really, really, really be heard and to be seen and to be allowed to be angry, as well. It's like, I feel inside myself all of these judgments that I have about anger and everything I know about what creates change in the best way, which is loving communication. And at the same time, I know that anger is a stage, and it has power, you know. And so it is. But yeah, whether we're talking interpersonal relationships or creating change in society, it's the primary safety of intimacy, where we know we can explore what's working and what's not working without being vilified, you know, without being attacked for what might be off, for what might be crooked, for what might be prejudiced. It's that's a context in which people have the courage to ask and to learn and to expand and evolve. I know there are lots of people out there that, you know, might be more willing to even look, let alone talk, but even look within themselves if they had more compassion for themselves. But it's like, you know, I'm sad to say that I would say, I mean, these are arbitrary figures, but, you know, a large proportion of people who are racist do not consider themselves racist, and do not, you know, just are not aware of the mechanisms of racism that are working through their choices and through their silence with regards to an unjust society. And so it's, you know, and so a deep understanding of that is important.
Yeah, and this is interesting, right? How do you get a deep understanding of something you're blind to? Because like you said, they don't even know. Or in my case, you know, I know I've got patterns, and sometimes I'm even blind to the patterns I'm playing out.
Yeah.
How do we reconcile all of this? Being and not resisting the angst, kind of acknowledging, I'm just going to call it out, we're all crap at relationships and relating, in the sense that it doesn't always work out. We resist it, and then we argue and our own point of view in that kind of narcissistic defensiveness. How are we ever going to make this work, Tom? Tell me, you're one of the best relationship experts on the planet, so surely you can tell us.
So the answer is looking at, most of the time when we're getting upset with our partners that stay in personal relationship now, the truth is what they're doing is what they're doing. And the reason why it's affecting us so strongly is because of our own unresolved upset. You know, our history of not being seen, our history of not being loved, our history of being abandoned. Okay. And so because that is unprocessed in us, and so much of that is about when we were actually righteously expecting to be looked after by our parents. So we got this marred confusion with our partner that we easily make them responsible for our happiness and have placed expectation upon them. And we also take responsibility for their happiness. So those two things are codependent enmeshment, which are where we all go wrong, or where a lot of people go wrong. And so the key is doing your own internal freedom work, where you map all of your upsets, you map all of your rejections, you map all of your sense of abandonment, all those moments where you felt that you were low value, or where life didn't work out the way you felt it should have. And you bring it to peace. You bring that to peace. You come and choose yourself. You choose your story. You find freedom in who you are. And from there, we still want our partners to evolve, but not for us anymore, but for them. So we just hold out this really loving invitation where it's like, wow, how you're being right now seems to be really related to your mom or your dad or this thing that happened, and you're kind of projecting onto me right now, and I'm curious. Whereas before it would be like, fuck you, you're a depressive, fucking anxious nightmare, and I can't bear to live with you like this because my life's going to be shit because you're miserable, right? It's just like, well, that's not going to make that person feel safe enough to lovingly dissolve their anxiety. They're going to hate you and resent you, and you're going to fall into a power struggle. It's really like, I'm totally fine and I don't need you to be different at all. And yet, because I love you, I'm really curious about this way you're behaving, because it seems to me to be marred in pain and fear and doesn't suit your soul, darling. And, you know, how can we work this out? You know, it's like, that's a place where you'll go, oh, okay, I'm being a dick because I'm upset about something. So it's got to be internal to me, you know?
Yeah. And so how do you come to that? Like, I'm listening to you going, I've done a lot of work and I still seem to have these scenarios play out. I'm pretty sure I did all this work. Yeah, I know. I did pretty sure I did all this work thinking, if I go do all these personal development programs, I'll get fixed. And never, ever will I have another relationship problem ever again. And at some point what I got is, you know, it doesn't really matter how many relationship programs you do. It really is about being at peace with your own sense of your own humanity. Like,
Agreed.
I am going to play out patterns. I
For
am
sure.
going to screw up. I am going to say things. I am going to resist intimacy at times. I am going to get triggered by my past relationships. We've all had ones that burnt us. And it's like, what, and I'd be interested to know what you think about this, Tom, because I tend to go, I need to now go through a process with myself. And the process looks something like this. I get triggered. I experience criticism. Like, I have this thing when I'm triggered, everything seems to be a criticism. If I hear the word you in a sentence, it's almost like someone's like, even if they're not, it's like, you this, you this, you this. So I just go, okay, I'm out. And I just literally switch off. And I know that if I give myself that time, I'll come back to myself and be able to communicate effectively.
Yeah.
So it's a process for me. Now, and the way I deal with that is I just go, you know, I kind of see humans as very mechanical. As soon as something's triggered, it's almost like it creates trigger. That's trigger, that trigger, that trigger. And it's just shh. So it's like I take myself away to impact the trigger, to impact the mechanism of that.
Well, the reason why most people go wrong is that when they're triggered, they do bad sums. So they're like, I'm triggered because you said something, right? And it's like, no, that's the big problem, and that's where we have fights, right? It's like, if I'm triggered, I know it's touched something in me, right? It's touched something in me. Now, listen, there's a difference between being triggered, right, which is I have unresolved emotional content, and what you've said has reminded me of it, and I'm now like withdrawing or attacking, or, you know, I'm acting out because you've connected to an unresolved wound. Okay, that's triggering, right? Now, sometimes people misbehave and there's a boundary transgression, and we will get angry and we will want to withdraw and we'll do that. And there's a difference, right? That is like you're acting out, and how you're behaving is not respectful or physically safe, right? There's a difference, okay? And so we have to know, when is this a boundary transgression where I need to be completely solid and clear, still loving ideally. We might feel ferocious anger internally, which is a wake-up call, right? But it's like, it's triggering if it's like we're still angry with the fact our dad transgressed our boundary all those times and we haven't resolved it, so we like fucking fire and brimstone at someone because we've got righteous anger, right? And it's like, yeah, that's not righteous anger, that's righteous anger and a whole fucking load of unresolved bullshit, right? So it's like, it's take responsibility for how you're feeling, full stop, right? And the simplest and most powerful model for this is non-violent communication, which is there's no reason to ever be a dick to anybody, right? What you do is like, I'm noticing I want to be a fucking dick right now because you said this and I made it mean this, and that hurt my feelings internally because I'm holding on to this. And what I would really like is this request to be honored. Yeah. And then the other person just says, first of all, and they repeat back every stage. I'm hearing that you're feeling this. I said this, you're feeling that because you're making it mean this, and this is your request. Before you even debate, the one person explains their whole pattern, taking total ownership, and the other person just reflects back everything they've said. And when you do it, it feels contrived. But my God, when someone does that back to you, you're like, oh man, that feels so good to be that deeply heard. Because that person's not going, oh, you're calling me a bad person, so they're going to fight in defensive, and they can't believe you're upset. You think I'm a selfish, blah. You know, it's just like, oh, you're having an emotional response because something's been fired off in you. Fascinating. And you're taking total responsibility for it. Beautiful. You know?
Absolutely. You well, you know what I can hear is, until we get to a place where we can actually speak in terms of first person, I feel X. I don't like X. It's bringing up X, you know, and I can see that, you know, I didn't do that. I was not doing that. I was like, no, you don't understand me. That's not what I did. Defense. No, like more like surprise. Like, where's this coming from? You know?
Yeah.
You know, and then when this is not my stuff, you know, full, you know, I know that. It's not my, it's not mine.
Yeah. Which is not loving either, right? It's a stepping
No.
back, right? And it's like, you know, it's like, so having this way to reflect back, it's like, listen, something's going on here, and you know, but when you know, but when our partner is triggered or when we're triggered, it's rare that we can stay in that non-violent non-violent communication place, right? And I love Thich Nhat Hanh's kind of take on war and peace. He's like, you know what? It's never about the first action, it's always about the second response. And when it's always hard in relationship is when you've got a dual triggering at the same time, a perfect storm. Then it's really hard. But most of the time, your partner's triggered, right? Your partner is triggered and you're not, right? So then you can hold steady, you know? You can hold steady whilst, you know, they're having their experience. Know that for a while they're going to be pointing their finger and doing all that stuff. And instead of just withdrawing coldly, going, this is all your bullshit, right? Which denies probably what something is a legitimate learning for both parties. You just hold really, really steady and invite them into that more, you know, that dance of taking ownership, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's actually a good point, because one of the things I could see is that I was triggered, she was triggered. So it was really more like I know this isn't going to go anywhere. You know, I gotta get out, but I didn't communicate it.
Also, it's really common, right? Because it's so painful because we love this person, and especially if it's around intimacy, then it's like, oh my God. So the logical conclusion is, you know what? Let's just step out. Let's cool off. Let's come back to this. I love you, right? But something that I've really learned with my partner is that is ultimately triggering for her. So what we have developed is, if I feel we need a timeout, we have to have a present timeout. If I say I need a timeout, it breaks her heart, and then she can go to another level of upset or anger, right? And so for me, what I've learned to do and what we're learning to do is, like, I want us to cool down and I want us to come out of our triggings. And it's amazing to be in a relationship with someone that has parlance around this. They, you know, this is in their vocabulary. They agree with the principles, even though we can't always operate from them. And these are the tenets of conscious relating, you know. And so then I will try and hold hands and just be quiet for 5 minutes and just let the tenant, and in that space, then we know we're reacting, and if we're reacting, it's coming from us. But it's like, we don't always remember that, but then it's like, don't withdraw. So like, people do this with their kids. They're like, this behavior is not acceptable. I'm going to place you in another room. I'll place you on the naughty step. And it's like, please don't do that. Their biggest fear is that they're going to be isolated and segregated and that they're going to lose love, right? So sit with them on the contemplation step. Don't fucking put them on the naughty step. And it's same with your partner, you know? It's like, we need to sit with, not stand apart.
It's so interesting. I just noticed how much I don't want to do that. Like there's this real well, firstly, I run an online business, so we don't even really see each other. So it's like there's this, but you can disconnect and have no intimacy even if it's online. That's what I've noticed. It's more about.
Was this an online intimacy, Clinch?
No, we just don't see each other as much as like
okay.
Yeah. So in person, and it's more like now where we don't see each other for a while, right? So it's because in my schedule, I only can see her once every 2 weeks. Right? So, yeah. So it's more like it's very easy to kind of withdraw when you're not around someone. You just don't text. Yeah, the energy is still there. It doesn't. It's like when someone thinks being calm is about being silent. But you can have a massive fuck you in the back of silence, even if you say nothing, right?
Oh, for sure. The energy always comes through. The intentional energy always comes through, you know, and you can also be completely not present, even though you're still there in the room holding their hands, right?
Yeah.
So I'm seeing people talking about passionate anger, you know, and it's like, you know, anger is self-love sometimes, you know, and it's just like, it's learning.
Yeah.
You know, it's learning that this is a part of us screaming for more recognition, and our boundaries have been transgressed. But it's like the anger is an internal wake-up call, and that if we can turn it, you know, if we can then bring it to love, take responsibility for it, secure our inner child who's freaking out that they're not going to survive, you know, secure our inner cave person that sees all stress as immediate threat. You know, your partner is not a saber-toothed tiger who's going to bite your head off. You know, we're having now an adrenal response to tension, which we then perceive as life or death threat. So then our teeth come out, you know, and our righteous survival anger gets like rained down upon our partner's head. And it's like, it's just, it's, you know, it doesn't help. But the point is, we need to go into our relationships like fucking ready. That organization I mentioned, you know, they did this training. So from whilst I was dealing with my traumas with the feminine, like the women were there, they were paying to hold space for these men, right? And then once I'd done that training, I could hold space for women, right? Dealing with their issues with the masculine. That was amazing training for my relationship, because there are times in those processes where you're just holding your arms out, like totally like this, and they've been given permission to, like, I'm playing the role of the father or the brother, and they are screaming in my face any number of offensive words, right? And I'm a space holder. I'm actually paying to be there to do this, right? Because I know they need to get it out, right? And it's like, now I went on that weekend expecting that, right? And I'm actually proud of myself holding steady. It was actually quite easy because it wasn't personal. But then do you think when I then saw my partner and she's doing that stuff, and it's like, it's easier to hold because it's like, this isn't mine.
It's not personal.
It's not personal. How is it ever?
It's so interesting you say that, because one of the complaints I get is, how can you go online and do all your coaching and hold so much space and be so great with everyone online? But with me, you get triggered, you walk away, and you got to go to be on the schedule. And I'm like, I don't know, you know? And well, I'm like, well, consider yourself lucky. You get all the parts of me, you know? But it's really challenging for me. And I know it's just human. But it's like, how does that happen, right? But it isn't personal. Nothing that happens to me online is personal. And nothing that I do in my work seems to be personal. But the moment you get me in this intimate relationship with someone, I become a different human being. And I think that's actually, like, this what's showing up for me, just as I'm saying that, is I think that's why I don't want one. Because I love who I am everywhere else. You put me in an intimate relationship, all this crazy shit comes up, and I'm like, I don't like these parts. I'm just going to, like, not have one.
Yeah, that's the choice that so many people, or they have one which is just not confronting or not remotely intimate, you know? And you know, this is like, you know, this is the greatest personal development opportunity, you know? It's just like, so I like this analogy, you know, like, you know, old-fashioned fencing. Have we talked about this before? I can't remember. I don't think we have. You know, so
like this.
Fencing, you know, like, so the central posts are like these big pencils, like stakes, spiky wooden posts that you bang into the ground, right? They're not, nowadays we make cement and make a post, right? But in the olden days, they used to just like bash a stake into the ground, right? And then they would then nail a fence post, a fence panel between the posts, and then you make a fence. You with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're making one of those fences, right? How do you know when your fence post is ready? There's a technical thing you have to do to test it. Do you know what that is?
No.
You wobble it. Like, you try and wobble it. And if it wobbles, it's not in far enough into the ground. So you have to hit it over the head so it goes deeper into ground. And then it's like solid. And when it's solid, then you can nail on your fencing post, right? Well, that is the divine purpose of relationship. You think you're cool? Let's see. You think you're free? Let's see.
It's a test. It's a cosmic test.
Of course.
And just to throw in, you know, It's like now just throw the intimate relationships that impact me the most, the ones with my kids, the ones with my intimate, partners, lovers, the ones that, even my ex. It's like, if I think about it, my friends seem to just be this solid place for me. I don't have these issues with my friends.
Unconditional love with friends, it is, right?
It seems some way.
I went a little Yoda there, but it's, with our friends, it's way more unconditional. So I'll share this trick that I do with my kids, which you can flip out and use at any time. So my mum has this phrase that you love your kids, but you're in love with your grandchildren, right? And I've seen that her love of my children is way more unconditional than it was her love for me. She wants my kids to do well, to get good grades, I guess, and stuff like that. But she doesn't need it in the way that she needed me to, right? So she has this phrase. So I've been playing with that. So every now and again, whilst I'm with my kids, and I feel that they're not doing something right, or I need to take a line, or maybe do some discipline, or this or that, and I can start being a bit of a dick as a parent. I try not to, but it can happen. If I catch myself, I just decide to upload my grandfather chip, the loving grandfather, and I go from being her father or their father to their grandfather. And you know what? Suddenly I'm just like, it's all fucking breezy again. It's not
so is, isn't it?
Right? And it's just like, now this only works if you had loving grandparents. Some people, like my grandparents, were horrible, but the archetype of the loving grandparent, right? It's
the grandparent you wanted to have if you didn't have it. Yeah.
And it's like, but it's, you know what? So many of our relationships, there are these little switches that we can flick where our perspective shifts, and we're just like, it's like what some of these positions we take, it's like we take it so personally, we take it so seriously, we make everyone else responsible, and it's because our inner child isn't resolved. Our inner child has a very righteous requirement of being looked after. It has a right, and its safety and its sense of happiness is dependent on others. And because we were let down, we're still terrified of being let down again. The solution to conscious, loving relationships and open-hearted unconditionality is overcoming the unresolved wound of the righteously upset child within.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you do say that, the righteous upset child. Because because of course I experience this and I go do the work. I don't wait long. I'm like, life's too short. Okay, let me go do the body work on this. And what I could see is there's like this deep sadness about how I got treated by my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it always goes back to this moment. My dad was very quiet. And, he was just being a parent in this one moment. And, he hit me in a particular way. And I was I was very little, so I was kind of moved and fell on the ground. And I guess the kind of experience of being humiliated and also unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
But there was this deep sense of wrongness happened. Like I got wronged in that moment. It's like deep sense, but not being able to communicate that, because I remember looking up and saying sort of nothing. But the experience I had was like, if he's doing this to me and he's meant to be the one that loves me the most, I'm really not worth anything.
Of course. Well, we do two things. The two primary defenses when our parents let us down is, one, I can't be worth much, right? And much more importantly, we don't want to think bad of our own father, so we globalize, we normalize the belief. We tell ourselves that people letting us down, mistreating us, that's normal. It's not that dad's bad. Dad's just a normal human. That's normal. So how do you think we're going to feel about intimacy and trust? It's like, I'm going to get real close, and out of nowhere, I'm going to get whacked. So we have to be careful. We have to have control. And it's like there's a department in us that wants to believe that dad is right, which means we can't trust anybody. The healing, and I do this all day long with people, is they sit down with their inner child and they're like, bad news, kiddo. One, you didn't deserve that. You're not a piece of shit. You're a beautiful child of the universe and you deserve total love. That hurts, which is why we avoid intimacy, because that truth, when we're deeply loved, reflects our father's failing. And more importantly, we have to say the words, you were uniquely let down by your father. It's not normal. Yeah, it's common, but it's not normal and it's not okay. And just because he did doesn't mean other people will. And when the inner child gets that, it breaks her heart. And
Well, it's like,
those tears heal. And in that, you get your value back, and you drop this idea that people can't be there for you, which means two things happen. One, you stop attracting people that will repeat that pattern. And two, you stop behaving with people in such a way that you'll pull that pattern out of them.
yeah, because I do. I'm like, all I can hear when I'm triggered by that is criticism.
Mm.
And it's not even. It's like all that's there is this. It feels like I've got this adult standing over at me yelling, and it doesn't, like, you can just say in words, but that's what it seems like.
Of course.
And it does.
And you're little right now. I can feel it. You know, you're in connection with her, and she needs you to meet with her and just let her know. And she needs you to be willing to hold her child's heartbreak. No contextualization, no justification, no explaining away that he did a good job in other ways and it was just how he was brought up. None of that. That's all true, but it gets in the way of processing the raw heartbreak. And the healing and the inner child is, you go without defense. You sit her on your lap and you're like, I'm so sorry, kiddo. You were so badly let down. You were so bad.
That processing away people's behavior is very interesting. It's like, I know he did do a great job. I know he was doing his best. I know he's a good dad. I know, like, I just go through it. And you're right. It's like, it's numbing to the actual experience of it.
Yeah. And it traps in place you're not okay and that people won't really be there for you. Because that's the defensive beliefs. They're not real. You're awesome, and there are amazing people out there that will cherish you and never treat you like, and be able to hold your intimacy, and you would never get hurt. And that truth should be good news, but to the inner child, it means your dad let you down. And without rushing to make defenses, just feeling the raw disappointment is absolutely transformational in our lives.
Yeah.
And when we do that, we are then able to truly be there for ourselves, to love ourselves unconditionally. And then from that place, whether people do stuff or doesn't do stuff, it doesn't impact on our value. It's not related to our value because our value is self-generated. And when we have that, and it comes and goes for everyone, but when we have that, then what other people do and say does not rock us in the same way. Our post is grounded deeply enough, and therefore we don't wobble. And then, you know, relationships can flourish because we can hold steady in our own self-value when our partner is triggered and questioning that.
Yeah, I get that. It's interesting, you know. Yes, sorry.
Just one last thing. So this is the thing we are beginning. When we have a steady enough self-loving system, which is unconditional, only then can we actually be willing to explore our delusions, our prejudice, our failings, our actual inadequacy, because we have enough stability to recognize, oh, I'm flawed. Of course I am. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean I don't love myself, right? So it's like I have prejudice and I have confusion. And when we know that, people can criticize us, and we will have our first defensive response. That's normal. But pretty rapidly, we'll go, oh, they probably have something. There's probably some merit there. I need to look at my model or look at myself or question that. You know, it's like, and we're able to talk about it, which is why I so admire you actually have enough self-love to be exploring your conscious reality, which is painful, not just with me, not just with yourself, but with an audience. That's actually a great sign of stability. Our job as humans is not to be flummoxed and floundered and to wobble. It's to be open to the wobble and love ourselves enough anyway to just keep exploring it. And you're representing that.
Yeah. You know, it is. I actually just had this thought, like, shall I connect to my inner child now and start crying? You know, and then I was like, I don't feel like it. So I even was like, oh, I could show everyone what it's like, but you know, I'm like, oh, it's just not there for me to do right now.
Well, let's just speak to the resistance without you needing to do it, because this is a really important thing for people. So as
I'm very good, just so everyone can hear this. I have a thing of getting numb. Like, as soon as that comes up, I'm like, I'd cut it off. So it is very When it's there, it's like very important that I express it.
Okay, so here's the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I want to say. So, how the system works, that whenever we have repressed content, and like my dad hit me, my dad isn't a good dad, my dad let me down, I'm not safe with my dad. That's pretty toxic stuff, right? You've later explained it, contextualized it, even forgiven it, right? However,
Yeah.
your inner child hasn't accepted it because they haven't forgiven it because they haven't even admitted it, right? So that's repressed, right? And as we approach repressed content, what we see kind of marked on the door is the score of how toxic that stuff once was, right? But there's no date on the door. So we look at it and our system goes, our protector goes, that's 80 out of 100 in fucked upness. Do we want to open the door? We're like, no, I don't want to. Why would I want to go in there? People often say this is like opening a can of worms, right? And it's like, it's not. It feels like it as you approach the door because the score is high. But as soon as you get in there, you realize it's historical. It's no longer relevant. We've already forgiven it. We've already understood it. But it's a deep willingness to sit down with that child and go, no defense, no excuses. You were deeply let down. It wasn't okay. You didn't deserve that. And it's not normal. And that's the saddest news. It's like, you know what? You wish your dad was different. In that room, there's a part of you that wishes and wished at that time that he didn't do that and that he wasn't that kind of dad. And to be able to just say those words for her enables her to feel held and loved by you in ways where you can then rebuild that self-love, and from there you can then be the loving great grandparent to yourself, and you can hold steady. It's like, I know if there was a young kid locked in a room under your stairs that you didn't know about who was scared, you wouldn't be talking to me. You would kick down that door, you'd put her onto your lap and you say, I'm here, darling, tell me all about it.
Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of doing that. It's a beautiful process. I've even got a guided meditation that will enable you to do it. I'm happy to put a Spotify,
Love you too.
a SoundCloud link, and you can do it. It's a 70-minute. It's a concept album. It's set to beautiful music, totally free. So yes, some people are saying it's like a Pandora's box, or it's like, you know what? It is. What is locked in those rooms are our creativity, our self-expression, our sensuality, our sexuality, our playfulness. These are like horcruxes, fragments of our soul that we need to bring back home. Some big memories of massive disappointment, and sometimes like tiny little moments that we're just slightly dislocated from, that when we just can go there and feel it. And here's the thing, we will run from intimacy if we run from our repressed content, because intimacy says I love you. And if you get a deep imprint of being lovable, and yet you've got a department in you that wants to deny what your dad did by telling you you're not lovable, then it won't let love in.
Yeah.
Because it can't let love in, because when someone pays you a compliment or brings love to you, what they're really saying to your inner mind is, my dad isn't okay.
Yeah.
That's what it means. Because we told ourselves, no, I'm not okay. And that makes sense of dad's behavior. But if I am okay, well, then he was wrong. And so it puts us in touch with our heartbreak. And so to journey into our heartbreak, to journey into our sadness, enables us to rebuild our self-love in such a way that we can let in love, let in abundance, and never be bothered again by anything anyone ever says.
Yeah. You might have to drop the link in here. It sounds like a few people want that.
I will gladly do it. It's it took 3-4 months to make, and the composer I work with, the musical lament in the middle, he wrote whilst he was grieving the loss of his wife, and the whole thing is that it's the greatest creation I've ever made. I've made 280 guided meditations on the Free Mind app, but this one is the most powerful recording. Our inner child healing. It's magical.
Okay.
So we'll drop it free of charge.
Into this thread.
Into this thread.
Yeah, everyone's like, we need the link. Yes, he'll drop it into this thread. That's just beautiful. And just hearing that, like, thank you so much, Tom. I think that's a really good place to end on, and it is, it's like, I always think I've done so much work, but then like being in the relationships, and I notice I just avoid it because I don't want to have to deal with this stuff.
Of course.
You know, I want to just run my business and thrive over here and do that. But realistically, it is something I really want. And
Yeah, of course. It's going to enable you to run your business way more powerfully. You know what Buddha said about this stuff, right?
no, probably not. Well, maybe. Tell me. What did he
Okay,
say?
so one of his kind of head kind of disciples, right, came to him and basically was like, I think I'm there. I think I've experienced enlightenment. He's like, yeah, that's great. Go home to your wife and kids, and then come and tell me how good you're doing.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So we just need to be like a great, 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 great grandparent to ourselves and everybody else, and from there it starts working out.
Yeah, absolutely. And be kind to ourselves when we're not.
Yeah. We have to be a great grandparent to ourselves when we're not a great grandparent to ourselves.
Yeah, and others. It's beautiful.
Awesome.
Well, on that, I think, is there anything else that you want to say? I think it's a great thing to end up on. I mean, we'll just go back to it, to recap, being crap at relationships, well, it takes work. It actually takes work. Relationships are the training ground for self-discovery. And everyone, I don't care what anyone says, is not good at them. There are people that have powerful relationships to their own feelings and emotions and are responsible for what they're experiencing, so that they can communicate in such a way, like you said, that you become your own great grandparent for yourself and others, where you provide that sort of love and nurture, and you get better at that, and you get more in tune, and you interrupt your own patterns a lot quicker, or you forgive yourself quicker when you don't. Resisting anxiety, we're all doing that too. It's, I feel it, we trigger, and it's really finding ways to impact that and finding ways to, deserve receiving a kind of relationship you really want. That's what I got from you tonight as well.
That's beautiful. So just one last tip, okay, for those of you that got pets, those of you that got children, so I want you to try this. Just, I know you've got kids, right? So I want you can tell them, or you can just do it whilst they're without them knowing, right? I've mapped off my kids for therapeutic value loads of times, and so, but the time. So you can do this with a pet that you love, or you can borrow a nephew or a niece that you love. But if you have your own kids, and then get them in a hug, Maybe they can be watching TV whilst you're hugging them, because it can take a bit of time. And you wrap your arms around them, and you concentrate on the quality of love that you have for them, right? Which is quite tangible usually, right? Just a really like this endless eternal patience. It doesn't mean they don't piss us off, but like really connecting to that love, and then just reflect on the idea of holding yourself. So let them become surrogate to you, like you're holding your little self, and just notice that very often the quality of love we extend to ourselves is nowhere near as good as the love we have for our kids. And so then you take the love you have for your kids, and then you project yourself into your arms as your inner child, and you allow that flow to then be landing in you, from you, through them. And it's a conduit, and it's powerful, and it works really well.
Yeah, wow. It's beautiful.
And you can do that with partners too. You can go small for your partners, be held like a baby, and take it in turns.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe not with possums, Lorna. I don't know what possums are like.
She's funny. I think she's like, with a possum, and then she's like, maybe not. It's beautiful. It's actually beautiful. I do love being held. I do. Yeah, and I am taking on getting more receiving as well. So on that note, thank you, Tom.
Thank
pleasure. You for always such a beautiful conversation and such a healing conversation. And thank you everyone who tuned in tonight for this. Carly, Haley, Talita, Claire, Helen, who else have we got? Jody, Steph,
Melissa,
Stephanie,
Nicole, David, Bear,
Lorna, Harley, if we've missed it.
Donna, thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you all so much. For those of you that we haven't acknowledged, thank you for tuning into this. And until next week,
Helen,
Helen, yes. Until next week, you guys have a great night, and thanks for tuning in.
Awesome.